innate ideas, the view that we're born preloaded with certain information, like what's good versus what's bad, or what is the nature of God. Locke thought that we are born knowing nothing, and instead all of our knowledge comes to us through sense data. But one place where Locke agreed with Descartes was in the idea that just because your senses tell you something, that doesn't mean you can trust it. After all, sometimes your senses give you false information, like when you think you see or hear something that's just not there. Descartes' response to this, of course, was to just throw out all sense experience as an unreliable source of knowledge. But Locke didn't go that far. Instead, in order to figure out whether the senses accurately reflect the outside world, he introduced a distinction between what he called the primary and secondary qualities of all things. Primary qualities are qualities that physical objects themselves have. They're not in our minds, Locke argued. They're actually in the stuff. These primary qualities include things like solidity, the density, weight, and mass of an object, and also extension, the height, depth, and width that a certain thing has. He also included figure, or the shape of an object, as well as mobility, which is this, whether it's stationary or in motion. So primary qualities, Locke said, belong to the thing itself. Think of this apple. It weighs maybe 150 grams, it's the size of my palm, roundish but firm with the slightest bit of give, and right now it's moving through the air. Those are its primary qualities. But it has secondary qualities too, and by Locke's standards they are not real, at least not in the objective, agreed upon way. They're just in our minds, but they get there through the primary qualities. I'm talking about things like its color, taste, texture, smell, and sound. The secondary qualities of this apple are its redness, how it tastes and smells and feels on my tongue and hand, even how it sounds when I bite into it. Locke believed that the distinction between primary and secondary qualities explained the disagreements that we all have about our perceptions of the outside world. Like, we could measure this apple in a bunch of different ways and all agree on its primary qualities, but its secondary qualities would no doubt lead to some disputes. Like, is it really red? What kind of red exactly? Cardinal red or carmine red? It's kind of dark purple at the top, or is it just like a dark pink? What about the sound it made? Would I call that crunchy or crispy? Or I don't know, like a bitey? It's like apple sound. We could argue about that kind of stuff till the cows came home. But if we disagree about its primary qualities, one of us is simply wrong, because primary qualities have nothing to do with you or me. Instead, they have everything to do with the object itself. Locke's reasoning was simple, even elegant, extracting a lot of explanatory power out of very few basic concepts. As a result, it resonated with a lot of people, and one person it resonated strongly with was the Irish philosopher George Berkeley. He was moved by Locke's empiricism and took it seriously. So seriously, in fact, that he ended up using Locke's own logic against him. He basically took empiricism to its logical conclusion, dismantling the whole process of perception to the point that he had to wonder whether anything existed at all. Berkeley began by taking apart the distinction that Locke made between primary and secondary qualities. Like, think about this apple again. How do you know its shape? Locke said the apple's shape as a primary quality is immediately perceivable. But Berkeley pointed out that you don't perceive some qualities of an object while totally disregarding others. Like, you can't detect an apple's shape without first, or at least also detecting its color. When you think about it, you can't detect any of the primary qualities without also considering the secondary ones. You can't see a colorless apple. You can't feel a textureless apple. In fact, if you try to strip away the apple's secondary qualities in an effort to get at the primary ones, you end up with no apple at all. Try it. Close your eyes and imagine an apple made of only primary qualities. So it has a certain shape, a certain size, but it doesn't have any color or texture or taste. You can't do it. You try to imagine it with no color, but really you're probably imagining one that's either black or white or transparent, the color of what's behind it. And if you try to imagine it as having no texture, you'll find that there's still texture there. It's just smooth. Remember, Locke asserted that secondary qualities are not objectively real. They can only be subjectively perceived. But now, Berkeley has shown that the two are inextricably linked. You can't have one without the other, which means that the primary qualities can't be real either. They too are just what your mind makes of things. So this led Berkeley to a startling conclusion. There's just no such thing as matter. There can't be. Instead, there's only perceptions. Berkeley's famous assertion, his version of cogito ergo sum, was esse est percipi. To be is to be perceived. In his opinion, there are no objects, only perceivers. And even then, the perceivers themselves don't really have any physical form. They're just disembodied minds, perceiving things that aren't really there. A little bit terrifying when you start thinking about it. In Berkeley's scenario, we're all set adrift in a world of nothing but thought. What's scary about this is that if everything's just perception, then when the perception goes away, there can't be anything left. So, like, please, for the love of Pete, do not turn away from your computer. If you stop perceiving me, I stop existing. But what if maybe you don't care about me? Still, you better not go to sleep, because as soon as you do, you'll to exist because you won't be able to perceive yourself. The only guarantee that you'll continue to exist in your sleep is to have a friend watch you when you're sleeping, which probably is a non-starter for a number of reasons. But in any case, the second your friend blinks, you're gone. So in the end, Berkeley believed that there was only one thing that kept us and everything else from disappearing into oblivion: God. Berkeley believed that God was the ultimate perceiver. God is always watching with unblinking perception that holds objects in existence even when we're not paying attention. The tough thing about Berkeley is, we all pretty much think he has to be wrong. Very few of us are willing to give up our belief in the physical world, no matter who's watching. We are sensory animals. We really need this apple to exist. Next.
Did he go too fast? That guy has a rubber mouth. However, he pointed out some real interesting problems that most of us would never encounter. I mean, what Locke said about primary qualities seems to make sense. There are certain things about the material world that don't change from day to day. They're consistent. And then along comes Berkeley and points out, well, you wouldn't know those things without the secondary qualities, and the secondary qualities change based on our personal perceptions, and if they're linked together, then how can you justify the existence of one without the existence of the other? And if you say the one can't be reliable, then the other can't. And we go down this little drain until you get to a sewer system where Berkeley says the only thing that's real is perceptions, and material stuff doesn't exist at all. And that just flies in the face of reason. That's not air talking back to me. Although I can move fast enough in air and I can hear it, but it doesn't sound like this. And Descartes, of course, he got trapped in the same thing. The only thing he can believe in is himself, because the only thing that's reliable are his thoughts, which leads to the illogical conclusion that if he could think of it, it must be real. So I guess the world really could be flat, if he could think it. And we know that that's wrong. So all of these show that there's a flaw. There's an inherent flaw. I just want to make that clear to you. There's an inherent flaw in how we think. It doesn't mean we don't think. It doesn't mean we can't come to some reasonable understanding of the world we live in. But if we all had the same capacities, does it make sense that we would come to the same conclusions if we used the capacities the same way? Well, that's an logical extension. Yeah, okay, so maybe the problem is you just don't know how to think right. So just come to class and I'll teach you how to think right, and then we'll all think the same way and we'll all come to the same conclusions. And that's what we call circular reason. We just go around, go around, go around, go around, go around. We never come to the same truth because maybe we're not all the same, even though we have the same basic construct. Is Locke right that when we're born we're just blank and we have no innate information? Well, we do tests on infants, and infants hear things. You know, we now have the capacity. They can snake a tube into a woman through her birth canal and into her womb and up through her fallopian tube, and we can watch the egg and the sperm come together, and we watch all this gestation, and then it gets at 6 weeks and it implants itself in the wall of a woman's womb, and we begin to call it a fetus, and you put this light in there to look at it, and this little thing who can't see anything puts his hand up or her hand up and covers what eventually will be a sensory organ that will, well, wait a minute, why is it covering an organ that can't see before it can see? And we're pretty sure they hear sounds. Those of you who don't have children yet, when it'll be hard for a woman to do it, but you know, I used to do it with I would talk to them in the womb. They hear, we think. You know, of course, they don't think like us because they can't talk to us. You know, they can't tell us what they're hearing or who they think it is or whatever. And it's not a dead end. I guess that's what I want to say to you. The whole concept of philosophy is not a dead end. We don't have to prove anything. And you go back to the first week in class, and I showed you a video, and they said philosophers don't necessarily come to the truth. We don't come to answers. We just keep asking questions because there's something rich out there about asking questions. There's something rich about the human experience. We have the capacity to ask. We have the capacity to open our minds and see if anything's out there. The greatest inventor that America ever had, or at least patented inventor, I think I told you this, was Thomas Edison. He'd sit in a chair with a rock and a bucket of water, and he'd close his eyes, and he'd wait for another British philosopher called the not yet known, and it would come to him. He'd see pictures of something, and he would draw them out and give them to his mechanical engineers and say, build this, tell me if it does something. And the fact that it ended up not doing anything never discouraged him. He believed that we were receptors, that things could come to us, that we would have epiphanies, that we would come to an awareness that wasn't necessarily rational or make sense to us. It doesn't mean things aren't reasonable, but other things happen to us. People, we call it enlightenment people. And that's at the very root of philosophy. There's a fellow named Bertrand Russell I just referred to. He's got a book he called Does Philosophy Bake Bread? Why should I study philosophy? How will learning this prepare me for a job? If it won't help me get a job, philosophy is not worth studying. In other words, if philosophy bakes no bread, why bother to study it? Well, Bertrand says this: the value of philosophy is that you enlarge yourself. Not just you, but the world around you. Contemplation increases awareness of yourself and the world around you. Do any of you do any meditation? I'm not talking about vacating your mind, but just thinking about something, just getting alone, getting quiet and thinking about something. You meditate on something. You may learn that. It's a very, very, very rich experience to just get quiet and listen. In The Last Samurai, Katsumoto, who's the head of the samurai, he meditates, he's a Buddhist, he goes into meditation, and he sees this picture. He sees it's kind of like a blue background, and on it is a white tiger, and he sees it, he has no idea what it means. But he sees it again and again. He's not disturbed that he doesn't know what it means. He knows that when he just opens himself, the things can come to him. Well, then he gets in the battle. He gets in the battle with the Emperor's soldiers, and Tom Cruise is there. And at the end of the battle, when it looks like Cruise and his people are losing, Cruise picks up it's a pole with a banner on it, and he starts using it as a weapon, and he's about to kill one of the soldiers, and the other soldier, the samurai, has the upper hand, and he's just about ready to kill Cruise. But on this blue flag is a white tiger. And Katsumoto says, "Stop!" Sorry about that. He says, "Don't kill him." That's what they're trained for. This is battle. And he stops because he doesn't understand the association between what he sees in his meditation and what he sees in real time. And it turns out, as the story evolves, Cruise is greatly troubled as a warrior. He's got a picture book and he's been taking notes, and that gets found by one of the samurai, and it gets taken to the samurai village, and Katsumoto begins to read it to understand his enemy. And then there comes a time when they've become close to one another and they're trying to understand each other, and they have a chance to take Cruise back to Tokyo to be reunited with his own people. And as they're getting ready to do that, they're going to leave in the morning, and late that afternoon